Sarah Mitchell had always been the kind of person who couldn't walk past someone in need. At 32, she worked as a nurse at the local community hospital, earning just enough to cover her small apartment rent and basic expenses. Her friends often teased her about her soft heart, but Sarah believed that kindness was free, and everyone deserved compassion. It was a particularly harsh winter evening in downtown Chicago when Sarah first encountered the man who would change her life forever. The temperature had dropped to -15 degrees and the wind cut through the streets like icy knives. Sarah was walking home from her late shift at the hospital when she noticed a figure huddled in the doorway of an abandoned storefront. The man appeared to be in his 60s, with a thick gray beard and weathered hands that shook from the cold. His clothes were layered but inadequate for the brutal weather. A thin blanket covered his shoulders, and beside him sat a small cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps." God bless. What struck Sarah most was his eyes. They held a dignity and intelligence that seemed at odds with his circumstances. Sarah stopped and approached him carefully. "Excuse me, sir. Are you okay?" she asked, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The man looked up, surprised that someone had spoken to him. Most people walked by without making eye contact. "I'm managing, miss." "Thank you for asking," he replied in a voice that was cultured and articulate despite his obvious hardship. "Have you eaten today?" Sarah asked, noticing how thin he appeared beneath his layers of clothing. The man hesitated before shaking his head. "Not since yesterday morning. The shelter was full, and I haven't had much luck today." Without thinking twice, Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a $20 bill, money she had planned to use for groceries that week. "Please take this and get yourself something warm to eat." The man's eyes filled with gratitude. "You're very kind, but I couldn't take your money. You look like you work hard for every dollar." Sarah knelt down beside him, ignoring the cold concrete. "What's your name?" "Robert," he answered. "Robert Coleman." "Well, Robert, I'm Sarah, and right now you need this more than I do." She pressed the bill into his reluctant hands. "There's a diner 2 blocks down that stays open all night. They have good soup and warm coffee." Robert studied her face for a moment. "You have a good heart, Sarah. Not many people would stop, let alone offer help to a stranger like me." As Sarah stood to leave, she noticed Robert's violent shivering had worsened. The temperature was still dropping and the wind was picking up. She couldn't bear the thought of leaving him outside in these dangerous conditions. "Robert, I have a small apartment about 10 minutes from here. It's not much, but it's warm and I have a couch. Would you like to come and get out of this cold?" Robert's eyes widened in shock. "Miss Sarah, I couldn't possibly impose on you like that. You don't even know me." "I know enough," Sarah replied firmly. "I know you're a human being who deserves basic dignity and shelter. And I know that no one should have to sleep outside in weather like this." Robert was quiet for several minutes, clearly wrestling with his pride and his desperate need for warmth. Finally, he nodded slowly. "If you're certain it wouldn't be too much trouble, I would be grateful for somewhere warm to spend the night." Sarah helped Robert gather his few possessions, a worn backpack, his blanket, and the cardboard sign. As they walked through the empty streets toward her apartment building, she learned more about her unexpected guest. Robert spoke with the vocabulary and mannerisms of an educated man, discussing current events and asking thoughtful questions about Sarah's work as a nurse. When they reached Sarah's modest one-bedroom apartment, she quickly set about making Robert comfortable. She gave him clean towels, showed him where the bathroom was, and insisted he take a hot shower while she prepared some soup and sandwiches. While Robert cleaned up, Sarah found herself wondering about his story. How does someone who speaks like a professor end up homeless on the streets? She pushed away any doubts about her decision to bring him home. Her instincts told her that Robert was a good man who had fallen on hard times. When Robert emerged from the bathroom, clean and wearing some of Sarah's oversized clothes that she kept for lounging, he looked like a completely different person. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his dignity seemed restored along with his cleanliness. Over dinner, they talked for hours. Robert was well-read and knowledgeable about art, literature, and history. He asked about Sarah's family and her dreams, listening with genuine interest to her stories about nursing school and her hope to someday travel and provide medical care in underserved communities around the world. "You have a beautiful soul, Sarah," Robert said as she prepared the couch with fresh sheets and pillows. "The world needs more people like you." That night, as Sarah lay in her bed listening to the wind howl outside, she felt a deep sense of peace about her decision. She had no idea that the man sleeping on her couch would soon reveal a secret that would challenge everything she thought she knew about appearances, assumptions, and the true nature of wealth. Robert lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the remarkable young woman who had shown him such kindness. For the first time in months, he felt truly safe and warm. But more than that, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time: hope. Tomorrow, he would have to make a decision that would change both their lives forever. Sarah woke up the next morning to the smell of coffee and something delicious cooking in her kitchen. For a moment, she was confused, then remembered her house guest. She found Robert standing at her stove preparing what appeared to be gourmet scrambled eggs with herbs she didn't even know she had in her refrigerator. "Good morning, Sarah," Robert said with a warm smile. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to make you breakfast as a small thank you for your incredible kindness." Sarah was amazed at the transformation. Not only did Robert look completely different, clean and rested, but he moved around her kitchen with the confidence of someone who clearly knew his way around fine cooking. The eggs were perfectly fluffy, and he had somehow managed to create an elegant presentation with just the basic ingredients from her modest pantry. "This is incredible, Robert. Where did you learn to cook like this?" Sarah asked as she tasted the best breakfast she'd had in years. Robert paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I've had many different experiences in my life. Cooking has always been something I enjoyed." After breakfast, Sarah had to leave for her shift at the hospital. She hesitated at the door, suddenly aware that she was leaving a virtual stranger alone in her apartment with all her possessions. But looking at Robert's kind eyes, she pushed those thoughts away. "Make yourself at home," she said, handing him her spare key. "There's food in the refrigerator and the television remote is on the coffee table. I'll be back around 6 tonight." Robert accepted the key with obvious emotion. "Sarah, you have no idea what this trust means to me. I promise you, your faith in me is not misplaced." Throughout her shift at the hospital, Sarah found herself thinking about Robert. Her colleagues noticed her distracted state, and when her best friend and fellow nurse Jennifer pressed her for details, Sarah reluctantly shared what she had done. "Sarah, are you insane?" Jennifer exclaimed during their lunch break. "You brought a homeless stranger into your apartment? He could rob you blind or worse." "He's not like that, Jen. You'd understand if you met him." "There's something different about Robert." Jennifer shook her head in disbelief. "Honey, I love your big heart, but you need to be more careful. Promise me you'll ask him to leave today." Sarah agreed to be cautious but refused to promise anything about asking Robert to leave. Something told her that Robert needed her help for more than just one night, and she wasn't ready to turn her back on him. When Sarah returned home that evening, she was surprised to find her apartment spotlessly clean. Not only had Robert tidied up, but he had also organized her cluttered bookshelf, fixed a leaky faucet that had been dripping for weeks, and somehow made her small space feel more elegant and comfortable. Robert was sitting at her small dining table, reading one of her nursing textbooks with intense concentration. When she entered, he looked up with genuine excitement. "Sarah, the advances in cardiac care since I last studied medicine are remarkable. These new procedures you're learning about could save so many lives." Sarah stopped in her tracks. "You studied medicine?" Robert's face flushed slightly. "Among other things, yes. A long time ago." That evening, over another expertly prepared meal that Robert insisted on cooking, Sarah began to piece together fragments of Robert's mysterious past. He spoke knowledgeably about international business, mentioned places he had traveled, and demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of investments and economics that seemed unusual for someone living on the streets. "Robert, can I ask you something personal?" Sarah said as they finished dinner. "Of course. How did you end up homeless? You're clearly educated, well-spoken, and capable. What happened?" Robert was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with pain. "I made some terrible mistakes, Sarah. I trusted the wrong people, made decisions based on pride instead of wisdom, and lost everything that mattered to me. When my world fell apart, I discovered who my real friends were, and I learned I didn't have any." "What kind of mistakes?" "Business decisions, family decisions. I was so focused on success and accumulating wealth that I forgot about the things that actually matter. When I lost my money, I also lost my family, my social circle, and my sense of purpose. I've been living on the streets for 8 months now, trying to figure out how to rebuild not just my finances, but my entire life." Sarah reached across the table and touched his hand. Whatever happened before doesn't define who you are now. The man I've gotten to know over the past day is kind, intelligent, and grateful. That's what matters. Robert looked at her with something approaching wonder. You truly are remarkable, Sarah. In my previous life, I was surrounded by people who only cared about what I could do for them financially. You've shown me more genuine human kindness in 24 hours than I experienced in years of what I thought was success. That night, as Sarah prepared for bed, she realized that having Robert in her home felt natural and comfortable. Despite his mysterious past, she felt safer and happier with him there. There was something about his presence that brought a sense of stability and wisdom to her life. Robert, meanwhile, sat on the couch, staring at his old, worn wallet. Hidden behind his expired driver's license was a business card that could change everything. Tomorrow, he would have to decide whether to make a phone call that would reveal the truth about who he really was. The question was whether Sarah would still want him in her life once she learned about the fortune he had left behind and the powerful people who were looking for him. Over the next week, Robert became a fixture in Sarah's life. Each morning, she would wake to find him already up, having prepared breakfast and organized something in her apartment that needed attention. He fixed her broken garbage disposal, painted over the water stains on her bathroom ceiling, and even managed to negotiate with her landlord to get her rent reduced by $50 a month. "How did you convince Mr. Peterson to lower my rent?" Sarah asked in amazement when Robert shared the news. Robert smiled mysteriously. "I simply explained the maintenance issues you've been dealing with and suggested that a reliable tenant who takes care of the property deserves consideration. Sometimes people just need to hear things presented in the right way." What struck Sarah most was how Robert interacted with her neighbors. Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman next door who had always been suspicious of everyone, now stopped to chat with Robert whenever she saw him. He helped her carry groceries and fixed her broken radio. The teenage boy across the hall, who had been struggling with math, suddenly started getting better grades after Robert began tutoring him in the evenings. "You have a gift with people," Sarah observed one evening as they watched a movie together. "I've learned that everyone has something valuable to offer if you take the time to listen," Robert replied. "In my previous life, I was too busy to really see the people around me. These months on the street taught me to pay attention." During her lunch break at the hospital, Sarah found herself defending Robert once again to her concerned friends. Jennifer had become increasingly worried about the arrangement. "Sarah, it's been a week. This was supposed to be temporary. What do you really know about this man? Have you Googled him? Checked his background?" "I know everything I need to know," Sarah insisted. "He's kind, helpful, and respectful. He's made my life better in every way. But what's his long-term plan? Is he going to live on your couch forever? What about when you want to date someone or have friends over?" These questions nagged at Sarah throughout her shift. That evening, she decided to have an honest conversation with Robert about the future. "Robert, I need to ask you something important," she began as they finished another of his expertly prepared dinners. "I've been wondering when this conversation would come," he replied gently. "I love having you here. You've made my life so much better. But I need to understand what your plans are. Do you have any family you could contact? Any way to get back on your feet financially?" Robert was quiet for several minutes, clearly wrestling with something internally. Finally, he pulled out his worn wallet and extracted a business card that looked expensive despite its age. "Sarah, there are things about my past that I haven't told you. Not because I wanted to deceive you, but because I was afraid of how they might change things between us." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. "What kind of things?" Robert handed her the business card. It read Coleman Financial Group, Robert J. Coleman, Chairman and CEO, with an address in the most expensive part of downtown Chicago. Sarah stared at the card in confusion. "I don't understand. This says you're the CEO of a financial company." "I was. Coleman Financial Group was my company. I built it from nothing over 30 years, and it became one of the most successful investment firms in the Midwest." "Was? What happened to it?" Robert stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. 2 years ago, I discovered that my business partner and closest friend, Marcus Webb, had been embezzling money from our clients for years. When I confronted him, he turned the situation around and made it appear that I was the one stealing. He had covered his tracks well and had fabricated evidence that pointed to me. Sarah felt the world spinning around her. "So you lost your company?" "I lost everything. My business, my reputation, my marriage, my relationship with my children. Marcus convinced everyone, including my own family, that I was a criminal. Rather than fight a legal battle that would have destroyed what was left of the company and hurt our clients even more, I transferred my shares to Marcus and disappeared. But if you're innocent, why didn't you fight back? Robert turned to face her, his eyes filled with pain. Because I realized that Marcus was right about one thing. I had been so focused on making money and growing the business that I had neglected everything else that mattered. My wife had been asking for a divorce for months. My children barely knew me. I had no real friends, only business associates. Maybe I deserved to lose it all. Sarah stood up and walked over to him. Robert, running away wasn't the answer. If you're innocent, you could clear your name. It's not that simple. Marcus has had 2 years to solidify his position. He's probably moved most of the embezzled money offshore by now. And even if I could prove my innocence, what would I be fighting for? A company that consumed my soul? Money that never made me happy? What about your family? Robert's voice broke slightly. My ex-wife remarried 6 months after our divorce was finalized. My son and daughter both refused to see me after the scandal broke. They believe I stole money from families who trusted us with their life savings. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. So you've been living on the streets by choice? At first, I was just hiding. I stayed in cheap motels and tried to figure out what to do next. But as my savings ran out, I ended up on the streets. And you know what I discovered? For the first time in decades, I felt free. No boardroom meetings, no pressure to generate profits, no fake smiles from people who only cared about what I could do for them. But you can't live like this forever. Robert smiled sadly. I could make one phone call right now and have access to millions of dollars that Marcus doesn't know about. I have offshore accounts and investments that I could claim, but doing that would mean going back to a world that nearly destroyed my soul. Sarah processed this information, trying to reconcile the homeless man she had helped with the millionaire CEO he claimed to have been. Everything suddenly made sense. His education, his sophisticated tastes, his ability to navigate complex situations. There's something else, Robert continued. Marcus has been looking for me. He's hired private investigators because he's afraid I'll come back and expose him. If I stay here much longer, I might be putting you in danger too. Sarah looked at this man who had become so important to her in such a short time. Robert, what do you want to do? I want to disappear again. But first, I want to do something for you. Something to thank you for showing me that there are still good people in this world. That night, Sarah lay awake thinking about everything Robert had told her. By morning, she had made a decision that would surprise them both. The next morning, Sarah woke up before her alarm and found Robert already dressed and packing his few belongings into his worn backpack. Her heart sank as she realized he was preparing to leave. You don't have to go, she said quietly from the doorway. Robert looked up with a sad smile. Yes, I do. I've already stayed longer than I should have. You've given me something precious, Sarah. You've reminded me what human goodness looks like, but I can't keep hiding in your life forever. What if I don't want you to hide anymore? What if I think you should fight back? Robert paused in his packing. Sarah, you don't understand what you're suggesting. Going after Marcus would mean lawyers, investigators, media attention. It would turn your quiet life upside down. Sarah sat down on the couch next to him. Robert, I've been thinking about this all night. You didn't tell me your story because you wanted my help getting your money back. You told me because you trusted me with the truth. But here's the thing. Justice isn't just about you. If Marcus really did steal from clients, those people deserve to know the truth too. It's been 2 years. Those clients have probably moved on, have they? Or are they still wondering how their trusted financial advisor could have betrayed them? Maybe some of them lost their retirement savings or their children's college funds because of what Marcus did. Robert was quiet for a long time. Even if we could prove Marcus was guilty, there's no guarantee we could recover the stolen money. But we could try. And more importantly, we could clear your name and maybe give you a chance to reconnect with your children. Robert's eyes filled with tears. Sarah, you don't know what you're asking. This kind of investigation could take months or years. It would be expensive and dangerous. Sarah reached into her nightstand drawer and pulled out a notebook where she had been scribbling ideas all night. I've been doing some research online. There are whistleblower laws that protect people who expose financial crimes. There are organizations that help people fight corporate fraud. And there are journalists who specialize in uncovering this kind of corruption. Robert looked at her notes in amazement. You spent all night researching this? I couldn't sleep knowing that you're giving up when you might be able to help not just yourself, but all the people Marcus has hurt. Robert stood up and walked to the window again, a habit Sarah had noticed when he was thinking deeply. There's something else I haven't told you. The reason Marcus is so desperate to find me isn't just because he's afraid I'll expose him. It's because I have evidence. Sarah's pulse quickened. What kind of evidence? Before I confronted Marcus, I suspected something was wrong. I secretly copied files from his computer and printed financial records that show the pattern of theft. I've been carrying them with me this whole time. Robert went to his backpack and pulled out a manila envelope that was wrapped in plastic. Bank records, client account transfers, emails between Marcus and offshore banks. Everything needed to prove he was stealing from our clients while making it look like I was responsible. Sarah stared at the envelope. Robert, this could change everything. Why haven't you used it? Because I was scared. And because I was ashamed. Even though I didn't steal the money, I felt responsible for not catching Marcus sooner. Some of those clients lost their life savings because I trusted the wrong person. Sarah took his hands in hers. You can't undo the past, but you can still make it right. Those people deserve justice, and you deserve to have your reputation restored. Robert looked into her eyes and saw something he hadn't experienced in years. Someone who believed in him completely. If we do this, Sarah, there's no going back. Marcus has powerful friends and unlimited resources. He'll try to destroy both of us. Then we'll have to be smarter than him. Over the next few hours, Sarah called in sick to work, and she and Robert developed a plan. First, they would contact a financial crimes attorney who specialized in whistleblower cases. Then they would reach out to a journalist Sarah had found, who had experience exposing corporate fraud. Finally, they would gather additional evidence by contacting some of Marcus's former victims. Before we make any calls, Robert said, I need to access one of my offshore accounts. We'll need money for legal fees and living expenses during the investigation. Sarah was surprised when Robert led her to a small internet cafe rather than a bank. He sat down at a computer and within 30 minutes had transferred $50,000 to a new account he opened in both their names. Robert, this is too much. I can't accept this money. Sarah, you're risking everything to help me fight for justice. The least I can do is make sure you don't lose your apartment or go hungry while we're taking on Marcus. Their first call was to attorney Lisa Rodriguez, who specialized in financial fraud cases. After Robert explained the situation and sent her digital copies of some of his evidence, she agreed to meet with them that afternoon. Mr. Coleman, if what you're telling me is true, this could be one of the largest embezzlement cases in Chicago history, Attorney Rodriguez said after reviewing the documents. But I have to warn you, Marcus Webb has an army of expensive lawyers and has had 2 years to cover his tracks. We understand the risks, Sarah said firmly. But we can't let him keep stealing from innocent people. There's something else you should know, the attorney continued. I've actually had 3 other former Coleman Financial Group clients contact me over the past year. They suspected something was wrong with how their accounts were handled, but they didn't have enough evidence to pursue legal action. Robert leaned forward. Which clients? I can't share names without their permission, but I can tell you that they lost a combined total of over $2 million. If you're willing to come forward, they might be willing to join a class action lawsuit. By the end of the day, Sarah and Robert had met with attorney Rodriguez, spoken with investigative journalist David Chen from the Chicago Tribune, and made contact with 2 of Marcus's victims who were eager to cooperate. That evening, as they sat in Sarah's apartment planning their next moves, Robert looked at the woman who had changed his life in just 2 weeks. Sarah, I need you to understand something. Once we file these legal papers tomorrow, our quiet life together is over. Marcus will know where I am, and he'll do everything he can to discredit both of us. Sarah smiled and took his hand. Robert, our quiet life was never going to last forever anyway. But maybe we can build something better, a life based on truth and justice instead of hiding and fear. The next morning, they would take the first steps toward a legal battle that would consume the next year of their lives and ultimately expose a fraud scheme worth over $50 million. The moment attorney Rodriguez filed the whistleblower complaint and fraud charges against Marcus Webb, Sarah and Robert's world exploded into chaos. Within hours, news vans were parked outside Sarah's apartment building, and her phone was ringing constantly with calls from reporters wanting to interview the nurse who had harbored the missing millionaire. Sarah Mitchell, Channel 7 News. Can you tell us how you discovered Robert Coleman's true identity? A reporter shouted as Sarah tried to leave for work the next morning. "Is it true that Mr. Coleman has been living in your apartment for 3 weeks?" called another journalist. Sarah pushed through the crowd without comment, but she could see the strain on Robert's face as he watched from her apartment window. This was exactly what he had feared would happen. Marcus Webb's response was swift and vicious. By the end of the first week, his team of lawyers had filed countercharges accusing Robert of violating his settlement agreement and claiming that the evidence Robert had produced was fabricated. More disturbingly, they had hired a private investigation firm to dig into Sarah's background, looking for anything they could use to discredit her. "They're saying that you and Mr. Coleman planned this whole thing," Jennifer told Sarah during lunch at the hospital. "The rumors are that you're some kind of con artist who targeted him for his money." Sarah felt sick to her stomach. "That's ridiculous. I had no idea who he was when I brought him home." "I know that, but the media doesn't care about the truth. They care about drama." The harassment got worse when Marcus's investigators discovered that Sarah had once been arrested for a DUI 3 years. Earlier, charges that were later dropped when it was proven the breathalyzer machine was faulty. Suddenly, news reports were describing her as having a criminal record and questioning her motives for helping Robert. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," Robert said one evening as they watched yet another negative news report about their case. "This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. I should leave Chicago and let you get your life back." "Absolutely not," Sarah replied firmly. "If we stop now, Marcus wins and all those people he stole from never get justice. I knew this would be hard when we started, but the pressure was taking its toll on both of them." Sarah's supervisor at the hospital called her into a meeting to discuss the media circus surrounding her personal life and how it was affecting the hospital's reputation. Robert was receiving death threats from people who believed Marcus's version of events. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. David Chen, the investigative journalist from the Chicago Tribune, had been quietly working on his own investigation of Coleman Financial Group. 3 months into their legal battle, he called Sarah with exciting news. "I found something huge," David said when he met them at a small cafe outside the city. "While Marcus was busy trying to discredit you both, I've been following the money trail. It turns out Marcus has been running the same embezzlement scheme at 2 other financial firms over the past 15 years. Robert nearly dropped his coffee cup. "What are you talking about?" "Marcus has a pattern. He gets hired as a partner or senior executive at established firms, slowly gains access to client accounts, and then systematically transfers money to offshore accounts over a period of years. When suspicion starts to build, he frames his business partner and disappears with the money." Sarah felt her heart racing. "Can you prove this?" "I've tracked down victims from his previous firms. We're talking about over $100 million stolen from retirement accounts, children's college funds, and charitable organizations over the past decade and a half." David pulled out a thick folder of documents. "The FBI has been quietly investigating Marcus for the past year, based on complaints from his previous victims. Your case gave them the final piece of evidence they needed to get an arrest warrant." 2 days later, Sarah woke up to the news that Marcus Webb had been arrested at Chicago O'Hare Airport while attempting to board a private jet to a non-extradition country. In his luggage, investigators found falsified documents, multiple passports, and banking information for accounts containing over $30 million in stolen funds. The arrest changed everything. Suddenly, the media narrative shifted from questioning Robert's motives to celebrating his courage in exposing a serial financial predator. News outlets that had painted Sarah as a suspicious opportunist now described her as the compassionate nurse whose kindness had helped bring down one of the Midwest's most wanted white-collar criminals. "Mr. Coleman, how does it feel to have your name cleared?" a reporter asked during their first press conference after Marcus's arrest. Robert looked at Sarah before answering. "The most important thing is that Marcus's victims will finally have a chance to recover some of their losses. As for my reputation, the only opinion that really matters to me is that of the woman sitting next to me, who believed in my innocence when no one else would. But even with Marcus in custody, their legal battles were far from over. Coleman Financial Group's assets had to be frozen and audited. Victims from all of Marcus's previous schemes were coming forward to join the class action lawsuit. The FBI needed Robert's continued cooperation to build their criminal case. This could take years to fully resolve, Attorney Rodriguez warned them during a strategy meeting. "Are you both prepared for that kind of commitment?" Sarah looked at Robert. thinking about how much their lives had changed since that cold night when she found him shivering in a doorway. We've come this far together. We'll see it through to the end. The most emotional moment came when Robert's daughter called him for the first time in over 2 years. Emily Coleman had seen the news reports about Marcus's arrest and realized that her father had been telling the truth all along. "Dad, I'm so sorry I didn't believe you," she said through tears during their first phone conversation. "Marcus showed us financial records that made it look like you had stolen millions. We thought we knew the truth." "You don't need to apologize, Emily. Marcus fooled everyone, including me, for years. The important thing is that we have a chance to rebuild our relationship now." Within a month, both of Robert's children had reconnected with him, and his ex-wife had publicly apologized for doubting his innocence. The family that Marcus had destroyed was slowly beginning to heal. But for Sarah, the most meaningful change was seeing Robert transform from a broken man hiding from his past into someone ready to build a future. The final chapter of their story was about to begin. 1 year after Marcus Webb's arrest, Sarah stood in the ballroom of Chicago's Palmer House Hotel, watching Robert address a crowd of over 300 people who had gathered for the first annual Coleman Foundation Charity Gala. She could hardly believe this was the same man she had found shivering in a doorway 18 months earlier. "When I lost everything, I thought my life was over," Robert said from the podium, his voice strong and confident. "But sometimes we have to lose everything we think matters to discover what actually does matter. I learned that lesson from a remarkable nurse who saw a human being in need rather than a homeless stranger." The audience applauded as Robert gestured toward Sarah, who was sitting at the head table wearing a beautiful blue dress that Robert had insisted on buying for her. She still felt uncomfortable with the attention, but she had learned to accept that their story had inspired people across the country. The legal battles had finally concluded 6 months earlier. Marcus Webb was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for his role in what prosecutors called one of the most sophisticated and long-running financial fraud schemes in American history. The recovered assets totaled over $60 million, which was being distributed to victims from all of Marcus's schemes dating back 15 years. Robert had been awarded $40 million in damages, money that represented not just his original stake in Coleman Financial Group, but also compensation for the emotional distress and reputation damage he had suffered. His first act after receiving the settlement was to establish the Coleman Foundation, dedicated to providing financial assistance to victims of white-collar crime and supporting homeless shelters across the Midwest. "I can't undo the damage Marcus caused to so many families," Robert had told Sarah when they were planning the foundation, "but maybe we can help people rebuild their lives and prevent others from falling through the cracks the way I did." Sarah had initially been reluctant to leave her job at the hospital to become the Foundation's Director of Operations, but Robert had convinced her that she could help more people through their charity work than she could in the emergency room. Besides, he had said with a smile, who better to run a foundation focused on helping people than someone who has dedicated her life to caring for others? The foundation's work had exceeded all their expectations. In just 6 months, they had provided over $2 million in direct assistance to families who had lost money in investment frauds, funded 3 new homeless shelters, and established a scholarship program for nursing students who committed to working in underserved communities. Sarah's dream was always to travel and provide medical care to people who needed it most. Robert continued in his speech. "Next month, the Coleman Foundation is launching its first international medical mission, and Sarah will be leading a team of volunteer doctors and nurses to provide free health care in rural Guatemala." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she thought about how far they had both come. The scared, broken man who had been afraid to contact his own children was now confidently leading an organization that was making a real difference in people's lives. After the gala, Robert and Sarah walked along Lake Michigan, just as they had done many evenings over the past year while planning the foundation's work. "Do you ever regret it?" Robert asked as they sat on a bench overlooking the water. "Regret what?" "Stopping that night. Bringing me home. Everything that happened after." Sarah thought about the question seriously. The past year had been the most challenging and rewarding of her life. She had faced media scrutiny, legal pressure, and the stress of helping Robert rebuild his entire existence. But she had also experienced a sense of purpose and fulfillment that she had never imagined possible. Robert, before I met you, I was living a good life, but a small one. I was helping people one patient at a time, which was meaningful, but I never thought I could make a bigger impact. You've shown me that one act of kindness can change everything, not just for the person you help, but for yourself too. Robert took her hand. I've been thinking about something for a while now, and I wanted to talk to you about it. Sarah's heart rate increased. Over the past year, their relationship had evolved from caregiver and patient to partners in their foundation work to something deeper that neither of them had quite defined. What have you been thinking about? Robert turned to face her fully. I know this might seem crazy considering how we met and everything we've been through, but I can't imagine my life without you. You saved me in every way a person can be saved, and I love you more than I ever thought possible. Sarah felt her breath catch. Robert, I'm not asking for an answer tonight. I just wanted you to know how I feel. You've given me back my family, my purpose, and my faith in humanity. The question is whether you could see a future with a formerly homeless millionaire who is completely devoted to you. Sarah laughed through her tears. Robert Coleman, are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking if you would consider it. I know I'm 20 years older than you, and I come with a lot of complicated history. But I promise you that every day for the rest of my life, I will try to be worthy of the kindness you showed me that first night. Sarah thought about everything they had been through together. The trust, the challenges, the way they had supported each other through the most difficult year of both their lives. She thought about the work they were doing together and the lives they were changing through the foundation. Yes, she said simply. Yes, you'll consider it, or yes, you'll marry me. Yes, I'll marry you. But only if you promise me something. Anything. Promise me that no matter how successful the foundation becomes or how much money we have, we'll never forget what it feels like to need help. Promise me we'll always see the humanity in people who are struggling. Robert pulled her into his arms. I promise. And I have a feeling that with you by my side, forgetting where we came from will never be a problem. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony at the homeless shelter, where Robert had volunteered every week since establishing the foundation. Sarah's father walked her down the aisle, and Robert's children served as best man and maid of honor. But the most meaningful moment came when Mrs. Chen, Sarah's elderly neighbor who had been one of the first people to see Robert's true character, offered a toast. To Sarah and Robert, she said, raising her glass, who proved that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the simplest act of human kindness. As Sarah looked around the room at the collection of family, friends, and shelter residents who had gathered to celebrate their wedding, she reflected on how one cold winter night had changed both their lives forever. She had given a homeless man shelter and discovered not just that he was a millionaire, but that together they could build something more valuable than any fortune. A life dedicated to helping others and a love based on seeing the best in each other, even in the worst circumstances. The nurse who couldn't walk past someone in need had found her perfect partner in a man who had learned that true wealth comes not from what you accumulate, but from what you give away and the love you share along the way.